Hi, I'm Mike. I'm a token maxing addict. Today we're going to look at ways to use GenAI without spending all of our tokens. Generative AI can feel different from the software that came before it. We have explained it with probability, prediction, and hallucination. Those explanations are true, but they miss part of the experience. A more useful question begins somewhere else. What happens when a tool can speak fluently before we have decided what the work is for? Here is the mental model we keep returning to. Generative AI may be the first widely available general-purpose tool that can produce fluent, context-rich output from a small nudge while we are still working out why the work matters. By knows why, we mean something human. We're not making a claim that a machine understands purpose. Think about a hammer. It contributes force. We bring the nails, the wood, the measurements, the sequence, and the reason for building anything at all. A spreadsheet can turn a handful of numbers into charts, forecasts, and summaries that can feel magical. Yet the workbook already contains a design. The human or team that built it chose the rules before the numbers arrived. Mail merge, search, and procedural games can all make surprising output from a small input, but each begins inside a selected frame. The tool knows what kind of work it is doing because somebody already made that decision. Earlier language systems came close in particular ways. In 1966, Eliza could answer a typical sentence with a conversational turn. SHRDLU could interpret ordinary language commands and reason about blocks, cones, and pyramids. They were remarkable. But each still lived inside a boundary, a script, a template, a corpus, or a tiny world. The human might be unsure of the result, but the kind of work had already been chosen. Imagine a conversation that starts with two words, climate change. The first answer may be fluent and broadly sensible, then the real intent arrives. We want to help a neighbor understand why this town has flooded more often. Then the audience arrives. He is skeptical of politics, but he trusts engineering examples. The response changes because the prompt changed. This was never mainly about improving grammar. It was about bringing missing constraints into sync. Software engineers use the phrase race condition when timing changes an outcome. We are borrowing that idea deliberately. This is not a claim about concurrency bug inside a model. It describes workflow whose parts no longer stay in step. Expression can race ahead while intent, audience, evidence, and judgment are still catching up. For a long time, the effort of writing gave thinking time to lead. There was a kind of built-in drag. We had to choose a sentence, then another one, then discover whether the argument could survive the trip. Now language can arrive almost immediately. This is a new kind of freedom, and it asks for a new kind of discipline. This does not mean early expression is bad. It's often the point. Drafts, alternate explanations, and strange connections help us find an idea we would not have reached alone. Sometimes an awkward first answer is useful precisely because it gives us something to react against. But fluent output can also make unfinished decisions feel finished. Hallucination still matters. In many ordinary uses, though, the deeper problem is synchronization. How do we keep intent, audience, evidence, and judgment ahead of the language we produce? We first notice this while writing, but the pattern reaches further. Requirements and design, research and presentations, policies and planning, nearly every knowledge task can now begin with fluent language on demand. The same convenience can make a vague product requirement look more settled than it is. or turn a loose set of sources into a presentation before anyone has tested its frame. In some kind of works, the bottleneck is moved. The harder question is no longer whether we can produce the words, it is whether the words are worth producing in the first place. Generating words has become dramatically cheaper. Understanding has not. That is why the familiar loops of drafting, revising, questioning, and reflecting still matter. They may move faster now, they may be distributed differently, but they do not disappear because the first paragraph arrived in 3 seconds. Education and work have adapted to printing, paper, calculators, computers, the internet, and search. Generative AI is another transition. Drafting and trying ideas are faster. Other loops deserve more attention. Forming intent, understanding the material, verifying it against evidence, and choosing a workflow that fits the task. These are not 4 mandatory boxes to check in the same order every time. A researcher may begin with evidence, a designer may begin with a sketch, a teacher may begin with an audience. The point is to notice which loop is missing before the fluent language quietly fills the space where it should have been. For generations, a first draft was a document. Perhaps it will sometimes be something else. A conversation, a collection of notes, a concept map, highlighted sources, questions, counter-arguments, voice notes, or sketches. In engineering, whiteboards and sticky notes can look like arts and crafts from a distance. They are often the place where a difficult system finally becomes visible. A data problem that has survived hours of talk can become obvious when someone draws the flow across the board. Nothing mysterious has happened. We simply stopped reading the relationships one line at a time and began seeing them together. The drawing does not replace the thinking, it creates the conditions for it. We do not think there is one workflow for writing with generative AI. Communication serves a purpose. Different tasks need different loops. But we can create thinking spaces on purpose. Ask what the work is for, name who it is for, gather what it must answer to, decide when language should enter the process. Sometimes the right answer is to generate early because an early draft helps us think. Sometimes the right answer is to wait. We are participating in a remarkable period of collective learning. Researchers, practitioners, teachers, students, hobbyists, and curious people are testing a new tool at the same time. We will learn from better prompts, but prompts are only one part of the environment in which decisions get made. The invitation is to keep redesigning the loops around the prompt. The moments where we pause, look again, check our evidence, and decide what the work is actually for. If language has become nearly frictionless, how do we make sure understanding grows along with our ability to generate words? Source links and notes are in the comments. Thank you for joining me. Like, subscribe, you know the drill.